Welcome to Into the Metaverse on episode 89. I am so pleased to have had the wonderful conversation with Edwina Fitzmaurice. Edwina is the Chief Customer Officer at EY. In that role, Edwina works with incredible people and technology to make a difference to industries and the working world. Prior to taking on the role of Chief Customer Officer, Edwina was a sector and solutions leader for the global advisory markets of the business development team at EY in New York. She was also a partner at EY in Dublin, Ireland, where she was the leader in the IT strategy and transformation group. Edwina is also a member of the World Economic Forum Global Future Council, an adjunct professor at Trinity College Dublin, and a board member and chair of the Governance Committee of Women in Innovation. Our conversation covers a broad range of topics, including technologies are driving conversation in the C-suite today, why are companies expanding into immersive metaverse platform, and why inclusivity is a core tenet of building disruptive technologies. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as we did. To make sure you don't miss any of future content, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platforms and to our Substack, where you'll find always more full information about our episodes and our guests. Thank you. Enjoy.
The metaverse is emerging as the next big technology platform and promises to be the next frontier for human experiences on the internet. Into the Metaverse covers companies, technologies, and trends that are bringing these promises to life. Join creator and host Jonathan Ross-Friedman, founder and CEO of Supersocial, as he interviews the brilliant minds that are building, shaping, and investing in the metaverse.
Edwina, thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to welcome you on the podcast finally.
Thanks, Jan. Great to be here.
So, Edwina, we've been fortunate over the last few years on the podcast speaking to really many brilliant minds that are at the leading edge of technology that really helped us establish this consensus around the metaverse concept. And that's not to say the consensus is done. It just means we're always growing and expanding on the perspectives related to the metaverse, especially unlike what the media claims. We believe the metaverse is only just getting started. And so the first question we like to ask every guest, and I'd love to kick off with you as well, what is your definition of the metaverse?
Well, my definition of the metaverse is actually quite simple. For me, it's a more spatial, more immersive, maybe more 3D kind of way to experience the internet. And so when I'm in a really simple mode, I say it's the internet in 3D. So people talk about the metaverse being persistent and having all of these experiences and being able to move around. We have a lot of that today already with the internet. And this is a new way of experiencing it. So it's a new channel. It's a new way to experience technology and connection and all of those things. I think people sometimes get confused and think the metaverse is just about VR, just about goggles, just about avatars. It's not. It's way more than that. It's that whole experience of being kind of spatially immersed. And that can be through virtual reality, certainly, but also augmented reality. And it can be done through a whole range of devices beyond the goggles, so you can do it in your smartphone. You can do it through glass in your car. You can do it through a laptop. So I think that kind of full spectrum, how we think about engaging on the internet, put that into a spatial kind of immersive paradigm. And that's what the metaverse is to me.
I love that you also outlined what you think the metaverse is not. One of the things that Matthew and I on the podcast have noticed in prior conversations, especially in the aftermath of Zuckerberg changing the company name from Facebook to Meta and the work on the MetaQuest, is how much people associated the terminology and the narrative around the metaverse with VR devices. And interestingly enough, Apple kind of chose a whole different path of calling the Vision Pro a spatial computing or a spatial computer. But it certainly merits the highlighting the fact that the metaverse is not a certain device. If anything, the metaverse, just like the internet, most likely will be accessed through many, many, many devices and form factors in the future. So thank you for calling that out as well. Now, you obviously had and are having lots of conversations with different executives from different businesses across multiple industries and geographies about technology. What are some of the key trends that you find top of mind for them right now?
Well, you know what I'm going to say, because there's no conversation goes on anywhere today without AI, right? So obviously the hype has really moved towards AI and what that can do. And I think we all experience the hype of the metaverse, and It was going to change the world. We were all going to be, immersed and living in haptic suits, tied up in our, apartments like the movies showed it. So I'm really glad we've gone beyond that. And now kind of we're into much more focused approaches to what the metaverse can be. But I do think the AI thing, I just want to touch on that for a few minutes. I think that's really important because as we think about AI today, it reminds me of, technologies that we've seen before, which are in their hype cycle, and it's definitely doing that. And I think, a lot of what we're seeing is a language model being engaged with through a written interface, prompts. People are typing. And that's not going to last for too much longer, I don't think. I mean, it'll be there for a long time, but people are going to be looking for something else. So the kind of whole idea of moving to multi-modal AI beyond the typing and the prompts and the writing backwards and forwards is definitely coming. So speech, natural language speech, being able to talk to the AI. And with that, and we're seeing quite a lot of this, people quite often say, can you put a face on it? Can we kind of humanize this a bit more? So one of the things we've been working on for some time, and we've been showing clients a lot of interest in it and excitement about it, is we've been working on Gen AI obviously for a long time, relatively speaking to everybody else. But, we have got a talking generative AI. And so we've loaded up, we call it Wan Yi, and we've loaded up it's a young woman. And she's Asian, she's about in her mid-20s, she's into fashion. So we loaded up this avatar as a Gen AI bot with all of our consumer product data. And so we can ask her questions. So what's going to be the hot, fashion for next year? What's the colors that are coming? What do certain types of characteristics of people like? What's topical? That's been hugely popular actually, because you're having this human-like interface, talking to generative AI with expression, making jokes, right? With the whole, hand movements and everything else, while also being able to bring up, data, facts, tables, images, whatever it might be. We didn't know if that would have an off-putting reaction for people, but actually it didn't. It's gone down really well with people. And so if you think about it, that's a kind of an interesting way to think about any IP that you might have or data that you might have, leveraging it in a different way with customers or with employees, maybe potentially even monetizing it in a different way. And so that idea of multimodal AI, and I would include that kind of 3D experience, sitting beside it if you want to go into VR or having a conversation with an avatar is something that we're already working on and have it out in the market. So that's kind of interesting. So that's the big topic. But I guess, when I'm talking to clients about the metaverse, it kind of quite a lot of the time is falling into about three areas. So the first is around employee engagement and training, HR, onboarding, recruitment. A lot of that, we've done a lot of work ourselves on that. I can tell you more about that if you like, but we've created a whole world. We had thousands of people through it. It was really positive. We learned a lot from that around gaming and the interfaces and creating rewards and what that's like, and the kind of engagement that we could get out of that, which is different to the kind of business engagement we can get now through these kind of, video conferencing. It's a very different experience, and we got really great feedback about that. I can tell you more about that if you like. The second area that a lot of work is going on, or a lot of conversations about and people are continuing to work on, is around sort of digital twins. And you're going to see that with manufacturing, anything that's kind of connected to aerospace, automotive, manufacturing, as I said, anything connected to health and safety, reducing costs, producing simulations, being able to kind of look backwards and forwards at maybe factories and rolling back the clock and seeing what was going on at the factory operationally in the past or projecting into the future. So I think digital twins are kind of interesting. And again, both from a virtual reality perspective, but also you can create a digital twin of an office. A lot of our clients have done that, created digital twins of their head offices to allow people to visit head office remotely that are never going to get on a plane. It's not going to happen, right? But they can come and see what's going on at head office and have a look around and get that experience. Or you could put digital overlays into actual buildings and let people, Wayfair, find their way around with that sort of thing. So that would be another one. And there's different use cases in different industries for that. And then the third one I'll probably mention is healthcare. I think VR has been quite big in healthcare for quite some time. And so you see that both in the clinical environment with doctors and AR overlays on top of patients in the real world hospital environment being used for real. So I think that's important. And then you see a lot around the kind of therapeutic side of things, VR being used or those technologies to help with anxiety or pain or phobias and putting people through simulations. So there's all of that. And then, of course, finally, there's all the retail and gaming experiences which continue as well. But I'm going to pause there. You probably have a bunch of questions for me, so I'll let you ask the questions, or I could keep talking.
No, I actually like that you've sort of alluded to those groups of areas. It was actually a follow-up question I have on what are some of the modalities that executives are thinking about or interested in, and I think you're echoing a lot of what we've heard in the past when we had folks from the consumer side on the pod, but also from, people from like Rev Laboridian from NVIDIA, with whom we talked about a lot on Omniverse and enterprise, and especially digital twins and manufacturing, and then employee engagement, which I think, especially in a world where people are going to continue and work remotely, although I love the audacity of any corporation that dictates people, you have to come to the office 5 days a week now. I want to see who are they and how are they going to survive in a workforce of the future where you have a whole new generation of people who are basically, they have a different preference to the ones that have been in the last, 100 years. And so it's going to be interesting, but maybe that's for a different podcast conversation.
Maybe I'll just jump in there if I may. I mean, we did exactly that. We had that idea around our interns. We hire about 3,000 interns a year and put them through a summer program. So we created an entire world for them to experience in the metaverse, and it was optional. They could go in or out of it if they wanted to, and they did en masse because we had actually understood that that's a community that really understands gaming. So we created a lot of gaming experiences. We put them through like training, kind of what would have been traditional classroom training was put into, different worlds that they could explore. They could learn technology by playing games. We taught them about purpose and building a better working world. We asked them to create their purposes and plant it as a tree, and then or a plant, and then they could all upvote by putting water on different people's purpose statements about how they're going to change the world as interns. And the ones that grew the most, won the prizes, sort of thing. And so it was a very different kind of experience, a different way to collaborate together, to work together. There's a lot of teaming, a lot of competition, friendly competition. We also did some 3D printing. We had them creating sneakers, and then we printed the sneakers and sent it to them all and this kind of thing. So it was actually very engaging. We got great feedback about it. And that community are quite a tough community to impress because they're all pretty native to, the gaming environment. So to be able to take that experience and put it into a safe, secure, data private, corporate environment, but create similar kind of experiences was really good. So we're rolling that out now to everybody as we think about our kind of learning and development across the business now. Yeah.
And I do want to double click on the employee engagement vertical. Please tell us more about the internal project that you guys at EY have done, and what is it? What have you learned from it, and how does it inform your approach to the next steps?
Yeah, so I think what we learned, so it was, we started with this idea of, as I said, taking our interns through it. So we created a world. It's on our own technology platform that we've built ourselves, which is, it has to have all of the sort of security. We're very security conscious, very data privacy conscious. We work in, regulated industries and countries and so on. That's as well as non-regulated industries. So all of that stuff's sort of important to us, as you would imagine. So the idea was, could we create an environment that had the same kind of consumer feel in a corporate world? Right. So we put a lot of effort into that. So we built our own platform and put all the security controls around it and then let them into it. So we didn't have to do a lot of training. So that was one of the big takeaways, was very quickly they got it. I mean, there was definitely, when we brought it to other groups who are a different demographic in terms of age, they needed more training. They needed more support. They needed to kind of, what's the point of this? Which is, we're having fun, like fun. Why are we having fun? Well, that's because it's a game environment. Like we're deliberately setting it up as a competition as opposed to a traditional classroom experience, So there were things like that we took away. But I think we also got a lot of feedback, and a lot of kind of the creator economy thing showed up. People wanted to tell us other experiences we could create, other things we could do, ways to make it better. So we're kind of taking all that together now, as I said, and rolling it out as part of our what we call milestones of training. So we have different training of different groups throughout their careers. And we're kind of putting it into all of that now. So yeah, but we didn't, I should tell you as well, we didn't put people into the goggles. So that was a very definite decision. We wanted people to experience it through their phone, through their laptop. We find the goggles experience hard for people to want to be there for a long time right now. Yeah. Obviously that'll get better. The glasses will get better, but we didn't want to, and we wanted to make it accessible to everybody, so that you didn't need to have expensive equipment or special access. You could do it from anywhere. So that was another thing that's pretty important to us. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's great because it really well aligns with what we talked about earlier. Sure, there's going to be a room and a time and a place for a VR device to be relevant, but I think a 3D internet is going to be much more usable and accessible, assuming 9 billion people can access it at any time, at any point, from any form factor. One question I have as a follow-up is when you think about this environment that you've built for your own purposes, how do you think about it now for the future? Is that something you envision can continue and become a go-to place for EY employees globally? Is that something you consider potentially spinning off as a separate product? Is that something you would do? Is that something you've shown clients and they're like, oh, wow, we would love to have something like that for our own remote distributed organization?
Yeah, I mean, clients are definitely interested in it because of the controls and the data privacy, the cybersecurity checks, all the kind of things that people worry about new technology. And so this idea of a trusted metaverse or a responsible metaverse, and, we would have filters for the kind of things that people can say to each other, or, if we're going to introduce AI avatars, what they can and can't do, and all of that sort of control. So from a corporate environment, that gives people more security and it helps them to get through the risk mitigation that they need to do. So we actually do have quite a lot of interest in it. We're using it as a base platform for our client work where clients want that. Obviously, clients also sometimes want to build on, the normal platforms that everybody else is using. But if you're dealing with sort of client data or customer data or employee data, you really have to think, you've got GDPR rules, you've all of those rules that need to come into account about what's happening to the data. Where is it? Is it at risk? Is it being stored anywhere? Are we breaching rules? Are we allowing people to be bullied? Are we allowing the kind of things in a corporate environment that aren't allowed? You're trying to not have it happen here either. So there's more comfort in that. It's something that actually I'm working on with, I'm on the World Economic Forum, Global Future Council, and we're putting together a whole sort of maturity model around trusted and responsible metaverse, using a lot of the learnings we have there, but also from the broader community across the World Economic Forum about what we're seeing there. So that'll be released later this year. So more to come on that. Maybe I'll come back and talk to you more about that, Yon, later in the year.
Oh, yes. Yeah, look, I think if I look at prior generations of consumer technologies that have been retrofitted or reimagined for the enterprise world, there's a few cases that I think worth mentioning. Right, there was the early days of what used to be the enterprise social network. If you remember, Facebook came out, and then shortly after, there was this company called Yammer that Microsoft bought, I think, for north of $1 billion. That was basically promising that sort of social network inside your enterprise. And Slack is another thing, right? Something that started as a chat that is much more kind of consumer driven by a game company, and they ultimately turned that into an enterprise offering that Salesforce again acquired. Salesforce itself at that kind of, they took a stab. I don't know if you remember, there was this thing called Chatter that used to be Salesforce's kind of early version of a Yammer, or what they hoped would become Slack and didn't. And so do you imagine that as enterprises and organizations look at building their own internal environments in 3D for employee engagement, socialization, and so on and so forth, do you imagine that they would build a bespoke bottom-up environment like the one, similar to what you guys have done for yourself? Or do you think because of privacy, because of all the reasons that you've mentioned, privacy, safety, data breaches, or do you think there could be a platform or a technology that would be available essentially to anyone who wants to deploy it, like you used to be with organizations like Yammer in the past?
Yeah, I mean, so we have obviously our core kind of technology infrastructure around the world, the way most organizations would, and it's in the cloud and everything else, and all of our data security and everything that goes on across that. So we then are using, some of the game engines as the core technology that we're putting on top of that, and then we layer our control environment around it. So we're not building a core game engine ourselves. We're using core game engines. So whether it's something like a Yammer or something like, as you say, different technologies. If they have an SDK and you can build a development kit on top and you can build on top of it, that's what we're doing. We're not going to build a game engine, right, of our own. The key thing is, how do you deploy these technologies in a way that the controls work, right? You're getting the full power of the enterprise sort of risk and security environment by putting these technologies in without opening it up to everybody else. So I think it's something that people will continue to do, but I think as well, they have to find a good reason to do it, and that's a lot of what we're seeing is, why would you do it, and why and when, and so it's what's the right time to put this technology in place? Is it mature enough now, and is there sufficient demand from employees or from customers, particularly in the corporate environment, from employees to want to have a different experience? And that's actually still a judgment call, I think. Are you trying to hire a particular type of people? Are you trying to hire younger people? Are you trying to retain a type of people? Are you trying to create an environment where people can have more fun, more experiences, more engaging, better learning? You have to come up with the reason, the business case for these things. But I also think there's a sort of a journey of, as it becomes more consumer adopted on the consumer side, it'll find its way into the enterprise anyway, right? So I just think we're on a journey. I think it's inevitable. It's just about what and when, and what the killer app is going to be. What is the killer app that gets everybody into this technology at the right price, with whatever maybe headsets or whatever might come, that sort of pushes it across the line. And I don't think we're there yet.
When you talk to your clients, I want to connect it to your point around motivations, right? Why would we do it? Why now? How much should invest? What would be the percentage that you would allocate, again, softly, between, I want to do it because it's very strategic to our organization, I want to do it because I don't want to miss out on what's coming next, or I want to do it because I feel the best way to figure it out is just by starting and experimenting? And then there is a fourth group of, stop annoying me with this nonsense.
Yeah.
This is irrelevant for us.
It's definitely not. Well, yeah. I mean, it is irrelevant for some people because they have other priorities, and that's fine. I would definitely be, in we should be doing something with this to learn. But I think a lot of people were through the original. A lot of people tried things out and then couldn't quite work out what to do with it. I think it's a strategic long-term bet. And therefore, it's interesting to me now to be at the Metaverse meetings and see who's left standing. It's a lot of really good companies. I mean, big names, big brands, banks, tech companies, consumer product companies, media companies are left standing and still working on it, right? Because they understand this as a longer term bet, and they're betting on, and they're continuing to bet on it. But the way investment is going right now is that the short term money has gone to AI, and this is more on your longer term line. But it's still moving. It's definitely still moving. As I said, the gaming environment is more compelling, and that's really a lot of the underlying experience that, there's more gamers in the world than anything else at this stage. They're also relatively young, but growing up fast. And I mean, there's plenty of people in their 20s, 30s and 40s who are gaming as well. But it's kind of the future of experience, and it's an important channel. And if you want to participate in that channel, you need to get on board and you need to continue making those investments, trying things out. But people are being very focused now, which is good. So it's like any investment with a return on investment. Where are we getting the value? Are we seeing things like safety is better? Are we seeing things like engagement is better? Are we seeing more customer loyalty? Are we seeing our staff giving us better scores, about people scores, feeling better about the company, feeling better about their experiences? Are we able to try new things that we couldn't do before, create new business models, digital channels with digital, maybe clothing or digital avatars, whichever it might be. And then another topic that's coming up quite a bit is actually around sustainability. And, is there a way we can use this environment to cut our carbon emissions, to reduce travel? to provide more inclusion, to allow people who couldn't, as I said, who can't visit the office to come in, or people maybe with disabilities to have not to face the kind of bias that they might face in the real world environment, to allow them to have more inclusive experiences, are the things that we can do around that. So the sustainability topic is a relatively new one this year. We were talking about it a few years ago, but more people are talking about it now. And I think that's an interesting development as well.
One thing I want to highlight is, because we were talking about it earlier between Metaverse and AI, one thing that became clear to me, and I'm curious about your point of view, is that while AI is definitely fundamental technology that is very broad and very wide and will touch upon everything we do, literally from drug discovery to productivity to, really every single thing we do will have impact through AI, including the metaverse, right? Because when we talk about the metaverse, is really more of a manifestation of a technology that is more about immersion, sense of presence, and so on and so forth. So AI is going to really help amplify the emergence of a metaverse, and especially on the consumer side, would help ensure that there is the ability to populate this large-scale, persistent virtual world in 3D with users and content that can actually sustain this sort of parallel universe almost, or parallel being. How much of those conversations are happening now where you hear more and more connectivity between the importance of AI for everything that is actually metaverse related? And if yes, how much does that help push forward some of the projects or the possibilities that you are envisioning?
Yeah, I think that's core to the conversation now, actually. And I think it will be an accelerator. I mentioned this idea of going multimodal. As people think about AI, they quickly say, how else can we experience this? They get, it's not that fun typing all the time and having to remember how to write smart prompts and all. It's just like, seriously, like that. That's tough, actually. So they're looking for a different way to create a different interface. So in fact, this is the conversation that's going on, right? And we're creating more and more of these intelligent agents that can exist, through the different technologies that we have now, through the screens, whatever, but also in these worlds. And you can have somebody who shows up, you can say, put a face, an experience, a personality on it. You can have a more intimate relationship. And I don't mean that but like you can have a personal relationship with these bots. They have short-term memory and long-term memory. You can have ongoing conversations and come back to them and really feel like you're being augmented. It's a real sense of augmentation with a coach, with a buddy, with a mini-me, whatever you want to call it, version, right? So that's a lot of the discussion at the moment. And so we've loaded up, I mentioned One was one, which was a bot for our consumer products group. We've also got another bot, which is our, consultant avatar, and loaded up with all our methodologies and our processes. And you can sort of say, what's the next best action? What should I do next? And so you're getting coached along the way. And I think that's going to become normal, actually. So being able to do that in an immersive way amplifies the experience again, having it beside you, if you can see a 3D equivalent of that sitting beside me here in the room, or if I choose to go into a 3D environment, instead of AR, go into VR, okay, that's even more immersive again. So I think the whole thing's going to go faster actually now. And so the questions we're into is, what is identity, and what does it mean to be a real human, and what does it mean to have these humanoid agents around us, and what's that like? So that's why, we do an awful lot of work on identity and the essence of humanity and humans at the center, and keeping an eye on that so that we don't get lost in a bot world where we've lost ourselves, so we're very kind of keen on always kind of getting back to humanity, augmenting humanity, helping us and freeing people up to be more creative, which they are. And they can do more things when they're not bogged down with administration and things that they have to do, which ties them up, right? Ties up their time. So we're spending quite a bit of time on that. Identity is a big topic as you think about the metaverse, avatars, and people, and intelligent agents, and how they all work together.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about something you recently co-authored, Edwina, an article on Information Week that focused on building inclusivity actually as a core tenet of disruptive technologies. Why is inclusivity and having diverse teams building these technologies so vital to their success?
Well, if you believe that we're building a new world and it's the new form of the internet, it's a new form of experience, and if anybody thinks the internet matters, which I think we all do, then I think it's really important that the people who are building these new worlds represent the people in these worlds, all of the people in the worlds, not just one particular group. So really keen on and I think it's really important to have diverse teams. So we obviously put in place all the kind of diversity that you would hope and expect to see across gender and sexual orientation and religion and where people are from and their backgrounds and all of those things. So we spend a great deal of time on that as we put our teams together. But we've also been introducing artists and musicians to our teams. And that's because of what I was talking about earlier, people who are really connected to the human spirit in a different way. And you put the artists with the engineers, and they're actually very often coming at it from a very different perspective about how to solve a problem and what that would look like and feel like and how to think about it. And I said this idea of identity and who we are and how we want to experience these things really helps. And it just changes the conversation. You know, we had Josie Williams working with us. She's a digital artist. She did work with us around if we built a metaverse world that was only informed by Black thought. That's what she's a young Black woman. She's a digital artist, very creative. And she wanted to create a world that was only informed by Black thought. So, you know, Black leaders like Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, Octavia Butler, people like that. And so we did that, and she wanted to create them as masks, African masks. So we created this world that the only data was this, and you could talk to them, and we called them virtual poets. And you could ask questions about what the world looks like. And what that does is informs you of what the world would be like if it only had one type of input, right? An input that we don't normally get to experience on our own. We also built a world that was entirely kind of based around a Latinx experience. It's actually one of our interns brought that to us, and we built that whole world. And so we get to explore things from other people's points of view and ask questions in a different way. And we had the AI bots inside of that with all the data and a kind of a curated data set around that. So it was really, really interesting. We've also been working with, we do quite a lot with disabled people, and we're thinking about, do you want to show up as yourselves, exactly as you are? And the answer is yes, of course. Sometimes, a disabled person, saying to us they get a lot of bias in job interviews. Sometimes they don't want to show up as and being seen as the chair instead of being seen as themselves. So they want to show up differently. And sometimes they want to show up as a bird. Sometimes they want to show up as a triangle. They want to do whatever they like, right? So you have to sort of meet people where they are and understand that idea that sometimes in a work environment, you definitely want to and need to show up as yourselves. But other times, how do you play around with identity? So I think having diverse teams really helps us to think that through in a way that we wouldn't get to, I think, if we were just the traditional engineering group that we normally have.
I love that. And to your point, it's so important that it's kind of obvious, but it's not. And I think especially in a world where many people dispute or there is lack of moral clarity on the role of inclusivity and why it's important that we build an internet that works for everyone. Because the internet is not just a place of connection and communication. The internet is economy. The internet is the world, it's life. And I think it's imminent that we have an opportunity now to build the next version of the internet, not a new internet, but the next internet, and really making sure that we're building something that everyone can feel connected to, belonging to, and that can work for everyone from a prosperity standpoint.
Yeah, can I maybe just build on that point, if I may, just because you mentioned economic participation. So we did work with another artist, Alina Akbar in the UK, and she teaches kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, young people, teenagers and so on. So we did a whole round of work with her and all the young people who were from these backgrounds who they had access to the technology. People often think, people from disadvantaged backgrounds they did have access to the technology, but in this case they did. They had their phones. They had access to computers at school, even if not at home. So it wasn't access. What was missing was they didn't understand how to use it or what they could do with it. So actually not just like putting them into it, showing them how to use it. We were able to show them how to kind of participate economically as creators and what that would look like. We were also teaching them to use the technology and showing them the kinds of jobs that were available. And that's a real eye-opener. So I think social mobility is another area that's really important, that we bring everybody along because the technology is there. People have access to it. They just need to be given the opportunity to know how to use it and what to do with it. So I think that's important too.
100%. 100%. Which brings me to a kind of the last part, which is also the most open part of our conversation today, which is, what are you most excited about for the next 12 months?
Well, for sure. I can tell you for sure. It's the intersection between AI and the metaverse. I think it's the fire that's going to light it all up again. We're going to see new headsets coming out. We're going to see, new ideas coming out. We're going to see new games coming out. We're going to see new experiences coming out, and that's great. But I think AI is going to light the fire, and people are getting used to having this more intimate, closer relationship to computing, to technology, right? If we didn't think we could get any closer, and yet we're talking to it. It's not going to take, we're in a journey of starting to personalize the experiences in a different way. And I think, and I'm already seeing it. People are asking us questions. How do we make this even more personal? How can I make this look like me? Can I make it look like, something that I can trust? So, a friend, a pilot, a buddy, a coach, whatever it is. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for more immersive experiences. So I think they're going to accelerate, and actually, I'm really excited to see where that ends up.
I am excited too.
Good.
Edwina Fitzmaurice from EY, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. And to your point, we're not done yet. There's going to be another conversation once you have more news to share later this year. But thank you for joining me today.
Great. Thanks, Jan. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Into the Metaverse. We hope you learned a lot and explored new aspects of the metaverse.